A 2,000-pound truck just climbed something your buddy's $40,000 Range Rover couldn't touch, and the guy driving it paid $6,000 for the whole vehicle. If you were car shopping in the mid-'80s, you probably remember this thing. Boxy, tiny, almost toy-like next to a Blazer or a Bronco, and somehow it would go places those trucks physically couldn't follow. This is the Suzuki Samurai, and it's got one of the strangest reputations of any vehicle sold in America. Half legend, half warning label. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why people either loved it or thought it should have been banned. Here's where it started. Late 1985, Suzuki brings this thing to the States as an early 86 model, and it's doing the opposite of everything else on the market at the time. Every other manufacturer is making four-wheel drives bigger, heavier, loaded with more stuff. Suzuki strips it down instead, barely over 2,000 pounds, and underneath, it's about as old school as four-wheel drive gets. Solid axles, front and rear, leaf spring suspension, and a real low-range transfer case you could drop into when things got technical. None of that was cutting edge even in 1985, but that's exactly why it worked. Solid axles don't flex and bind the way independent suspension does when a wheel's hanging off a ledge. They just let the axle articulate and keep power going to the ground. Leaf springs are basically indestructible and dirt simple to fix on the trail. And that low-range gearing is what actually lets you crawl at walking pace with total control instead of riding the brake down a hill. Put light weight on top of that setup, and you've got a truck that can pivot and hop over stuff a 2.5-ton Bronco has to bulldoze through. The approach angles, the departure angles, the ground clearance relative to size, none of it made sense next to the price tag. Around $6,000 new for a truck that could outclimb rigs costing 3 or 4 times as much. Guys who actually wheeled their trucks, not just drove them to the mall looking tough, wanted this thing immediately. Dealers couldn't keep them in stock. And that's where the story should have just ended happily. It didn't. Because the exact thing that made this truck a genius on a rock ledge is the same thing that made it scary on a highway on-ramp. Short wheelbase, narrow stance, and a ride height jacked up for clearance, which pushes your center of gravity up higher and higher. Great for crawling over a boulder at 3 miles an hour. Not so great when you're doing 55 and something jumps out in front of you. June 1988, Consumer Reports runs their standard emergency swerve test, basically simulating you jerking the wheel to miss a dog in the road. The Samurai's inside wheels come off the ground. Not once, multiple times, repeatedly. Their rating, not acceptable. First vehicle to get that label from them in over 10 years. Suzuki went to war over it, sued Consumer Reports for defamation, claimed the test was rigged to force a rollover that would never happen on a real road. That lawsuit dragged on for over 15 years. And here's the part most people get wrong. Suzuki didn't win it. It ended in a settlement in 2004. No money changed hands. Consumer Reports never retracted the article or the rating. Both sides basically agreed to a joint statement saying the rollover happened under a severe sudden avoidance test and left it at that. So not a victory for either side, just a very expensive draw. But none of that mattered back in '88. Nobody was thinking about a lawsuit that hadn't even happened yet. Everybody just remembered rolls over. Sales that were unstoppable in '86 basically dried up by the end of the decade. One phrase from one magazine article took down a truck that Suzuki couldn't build fast enough 2 years earlier. And look, even if you ignore the rollover story completely, this thing had other problems. Take it on a normal interstate and you'd feel exactly why it wasn't built for that job. That short wheelbase that made it so nimble off-road turns into a nightmare on pavement. Every crack and pothole jolts straight into your spine. Crosswinds shove it around like it weighs nothing, which again, it basically does. Under the hood, a 1.3-liter four-cylinder making around 63 horsepower. Getting up to highway speed wasn't really acceleration, it was more of a slow negotiation with physics. Safety equipment was basically non-existent by today's standards. No airbags. A roll bar that gave you peace of mind more than actual protection. This was built in an era where safety feature meant you had a seatbelt and you hoped for the best. So which is it? Brilliant little truck that got unfairly murdered by one magazine test? Or genuinely unsafe vehicle that earned every bit of the reputation it got? Honestly, probably both at once. That's what makes it interesting 3 decades later. Ask it to do the one job it was built for, technical off-roading, and it's untouchable at the price. Ask it to be a normal commuter car, and it falls apart fast. That's exactly why people are hunting these down and paying real money for clean ones today. Not in spite of the drama, because of it. A good original Samurai isn't just some cheap old 4x4 anymore. It's basically a piece of an argument that never really got settled. Not even in court, not even 15 years later.